A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very good morning to my friends in America. Today is International Day of Children's Book, and so therefore, you must have seen all the sessions that we had were pertaining to this day. Today, again, in this today evening, I have someone from Eugene, Oregon, America, and her name is Miss Sarah Donn. She is a teacher, an English teacher, and she has been teaching since 12 years. So, Sarah, I believe you have been teaching Korean students also. You have taught them in person and online for 7 years, right? And now you are a grade two teacher with an elementary school in Eugene.
Yes.
So, I think India and America both have had a very, a similar kind of situation or, a state in history, which was like a discrimination. Not just racial, but economical, all kind of discriminations. And so I think, believe this is the topic that you're going to talk about. That since childhood we have read it in history, we got our lessons from history, and in this century, most of it, as children when we are growing up, we were given the lessons of how to look upon everybody as equal. And today, being a very auspicious day, also by chance it is that I think the person or the what do you call the representative of God who crucified himself for us, he also tried to give the same message. So thank you, Sarah, for picking up such a sensitive, topic pertaining to both the days, the Children's International Day of Books, and also to Good Friday. So what she's going to talk about is bridging this cultural gap through books that children can read and understand this racial discrimination, and cultural gap, of course. So, how can books bridge that? Thank you, Sora. And now this stage is all yours. I would like you to throw some light upon it.
Thank you so much, Shilpi. I'm so honored to be here today. Yes, so I chose this topic because it's something that's very passionate to my heart, not only because I love books and I grew up, loving books and reading all the time, and I bring that into my classroom as much as I possibly can, but because as a teacher, I have seen for myself how even the youngest of children have a lot of doors opened for them when they read books. That opens up a lot of meaningful and complex topics and discussions for them that a lot of times adults, I think, take for granted that young children have the comprehension for. So as you mentioned just a moment ago, there is, I think globally, this is an issue everywhere, but here where I live, this has been, historically a place of racial division and political division, social division, and just in recent times that has really seemed to escalate to a troubling level in recent times. So I feel that education of children and teaching empathy and preparing our students to become global citizens is more important now than ever. I do believe too that there are different reasons for the division happening right now. A lot of it is political, but I also think that we have a shift in our culture recently with the increase in technology and children being exposed to more screen time, and they're getting a lot less social interaction. And there's been a lot of research coming out that shows that children's brains are actually being rewired when they have too much screen time. And especially now with the global pandemic, so many students have been isolated in the last year. They've received even less social interaction than they were getting before, and they are spending the majority of their time on a screen, whether it is for school or playing video games or just scrolling through different apps. And while those things all have their purpose, and they are all very valuable tools, we really need to have a healthy balance if we are going to produce a generation that can communicate in a healthy way and have tolerance for each other and be able to communicate in a way that allows us to be competent, healthy, positive global citizens. And of course, we don't really know what the long-term societal effects are going to be of this shift in our culture and all of this technology. But I can tell you as an educator that we do already see some effects in our classrooms. The students that come in, they don't have the social skills that children 10, 15 years ago had. They lose the ability to focus. There's this instant gratification in our society now for both adults and children. And, they really need to be able to develop being able to see people face to face, being able to communicate and have good listening skills, to not always have that instant gratification, and to really be able to slow down and listen to people's stories, to develop that empathy piece as well. I do believe that education is one of the first places to start at any age. And I believe that families, especially now with the global pandemic happening, parents and families really need to work together with their child's educators as a team on this. And so one of the great places to start that's accessible for most families is being able to just read to your children. Sitting down and reading a book and having discussions about the story and the characters together. And as a teacher, I really believe that my classroom library is my toolbox as an educator. The books that I choose to have in my library serve a purpose. And, I try to I'm constantly building on my classroom library, not just so that I can have a large variety of books for my children to read when they are here with me, but also because those books are ones that I have specifically chosen and picked out to serve a purpose, whether it's to start a discussion or show a new perspective on something. And so the books in my toolbox, I really need to look at and think about. Books have a long history of having a lot of bias and stereotypes. They are not inclusive. The majority of books do not represent all people. People of color especially are very underrepresented in most children's books. Very, very recently in modern times that has started to shift, and there is starting to become a lot more quality books that show people of color in them, and that is wonderful. But we still have a long way to go on that. I live in an area and I teach in an area that is predominantly white. And a lot of the students that I have not been exposed to a lot of diversity in their lives. They haven't seen the world beyond their backyard, and they only see other people that look like them and have had the same experiences as them. And so a lot of times books provide their first exposure to diversity. And so books can become a very powerful tool for exploring multicultural similarities and differences. They can provide a window into experiences and backgrounds and cultures that are different than their own. There's a scholar named Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, and he says that books are either mirrors or windows for readers. And what that means is that if you read a story where the characters are different from you and have different experiences than you, that provides a window for you to look out into a world that you can learn from. Or books can be mirrors. So if you see yourself in a story and you can relate to it because the person looks like you or has experienced something you've experienced, that is a mirror for you. And so both of those are just as powerful and important to have for all students in the classroom. Students need to have books that serve as both windows and mirrors for them. Um, pardon me, my throat's a little messed up here today. But I wanted to say that for students in the classroom, books that are that serve as mirrors for students. So when a student comes into my classroom, and if they are already coming in feeling different from their peers, either because of the color of their skin or because of the language they speak or their social economic background, I've seen it firsthand. They come in, they're very insecure. They've just kind of already established in their mindset that I am different and I don't have a voice. And so when they see books and they read stories and they hear stories with characters that look like them and people that they can relate to, they really open up. Their eyes get brighter. They get excited, and it's very validating for them, and they feel like they belong in the community. It also inspires them because then they get really excited because they feel pride about their own identity and they want to share their stories. And I believe that that is the first step in really building a strong community in a classroom and really starting to get students that have different perspectives and different experiences talking with each other and learning from each other and listening to each other's stories. On the other side of that, if a student reads a story that is a window for them, maybe they don't relate to the character so much, they are given an opportunity that they might not normally get in their everyday life to really get a glimpse and experience somebody else's experience and start to really have a deeper understanding of what other people in the world might be feeling or going through, and be able to just relate and have those conversations a little more. I teach very young students. I teach 7 and 8-year-old students. And, a lot of times I feel like in the educational world, these topics really get emphasized more in the upper grades. But I really want to emphasize today that it doesn't matter the age of your students. Even the youngest of students have a capacity to understand complex topics as long as they are given an avenue for that. And I believe that good quality books really provide an age-appropriate way for that to become accessible for them. I will give an example. When I first began my career, I took a workshop with a wonderful, wonderful teacher named Judy Davies, and she's an expert on this topic. And I remember she talked about an activity that she does with her class, and she also teaches second grade. And I thought, oh, wow, because I just, I had taken for granted as well that the age level of the students I was going to be working with would really be able to dive into these topics. But she told about an activity that she did with her class. And I thought, well, I think I could maybe try that in mine. And so I brought it back to mine and did it with my class. And I was incredibly humbled as a teacher to see what unfolded in my classroom. So basically what we did was we took all of the books out of my classroom library, and I have many of them, and we just laid them all out. And I had the students sort the books into 2 piles, and one pile was for all of the books that only showed white characters. And then we had a pile of books that showed people of color. And actually, I guess we had third piles because we had the third pile was non-human characters. So it was actually a pretty fun activity to see the kids working together as a team, and they're shuffling things and sorting them. And even some of the books that were a little bit questionable, they were having some great discussions about which piles they should go into. At the end of it, of course, we had this huge, huge tower of books that, only represented white characters, and, a pretty significant smaller pile of books for characters of color. And so we had a discussion, and I just asked them what they noticed, and they were incredibly insightful. They were able to identify stereotypes. They were able to identify that some of their classmates were being underrepresented in our classroom library. They expressed the need, and they were very passionate about it, expressed the need to have more books that represent those underrepresented communities. And I think the best part about it for me as a teacher was being able to really just kind of stand back, and I didn't even really instigate any of these ideas or discussions other than I had them sort these books and tell me what they noticed. And they really took off with the discussion on their own. And I think that in a lot of ways, my second graders, are not only very capable of understanding these topics, but, are able to have meaningful discussions about them and share ideas about them than a lot of adults that I have seen have these discussions. So, I think that we don't give kids enough credit when it comes to social issues and racial issues and other, kind of sensitive topics. And I think that, authors and illustrators really have an obligation in modern times to really make an effort to make more stories, more characters that every student can relate to in some way. Or provide a window for students to other cultures different than theirs, people that are different than theirs, different genders as well. And so I think that not only do authors and illustrators have this responsibility, obviously educators have a responsibility to be very choosy about the books that they pick for their libraries, and to also make a wide variety available. I still am continuing to build on my classroom library. There is still not enough equity in my mind in my classroom library, and so I'm constantly looking for new books that are quality books. But families and parents, if they have books accessible to them, I believe that that is the first place to start. Before students even get to the classroom, before they even come into school, families can already be sitting down and reading stories with their children and asking open-minded questions and having discussions about the characters and the problems in the stories. And just relating it to themselves and how they can relate to it as a family and individuals, but also how that might be connected to the world around them and maybe a world that they haven't been exposed to. And that will really help to build empathy among students, and help when they do come to school with being able to have healthy communication and successful discussions, and being able to really build on that as they move forward in their education. Going back to the technology piece, when students are exposed to so much screen time, they don't have an opportunity to build those social skills, like I mentioned before, like empathy and healthy communication. And not only that, but a lot of students who have a lot of time on their screens are usually playing video games. They're also exposed to social media, and we have a very consuming social media culture now, and that can come with a lot of baggage. So, even if a student doesn't have a social media account, oftentimes they are exposed to their parents' social media accounts or their siblings. And they see, even at a very young age, a lot of the negativity, the ignorant comments that people post, and the intolerance, and people don't have as much of a filter on them when they're on social media as they do face to face. And when you grow up in that, surrounded by that, you you kind of just see the world as not having a filter on it, and not really taking the time to sit and learn about other people and why people feel the way that they do. So again, I think that, apologize about that. Again, I do think that books are probably the most powerful tool that can reach human beings of all ages, whether you are college, adult, kindergarten. Books can provide an age-appropriate way to really open up a lot of mirrors and windows for you. And yeah, I think that they are precious, precious additions to any teacher's toolbox, and it shouldn't be taken very lightly. I think that really being able to give students the space as well. So, you know, when I do a read aloud in my classroom, you know, most of the time when I expose my students to books, I really just want them to have a love for reading and a love for books. And so I don't always focus on a heavy discussion with every book. Sometimes I'm just reading a book for fun. And you know, there have actually been times where I have just read a book for fun. You know, the kids come in from recess, and, you know, a read aloud is a great way to have them, you know, transition and calm their bodies back down before we dive into our learning for the day. And, you know, sometimes the students will really surprise me because I'll do a read aloud, and, you know, I'll look out and I'll see expressions on their faces. And sometimes kids will be crying, or kids will be really curious about something all of a sudden and start asking me questions about something. And, you know, those can become very teachable moments, and really giving children a safe space to be able to share their thoughts and ideas and perspectives on a story that we've read is a very powerful thing. And they really learn how to listen to each other and learn from each other. Especially when we have a more diverse classroom. It can really open up a lot of interactions between students where, again, I get to just kind of sit back and watch them have these powerful discussions. And I really am able to witness them start to have a deeper understanding for each other. And, you know, we start out the school year with, you know, it's just kind of this unknown, and kids come in and they don't really know how to interact appropriately. And they don't really have a lot of tolerance, or they might laugh and make fun of somebody else for being different. And, you know, by the time we start having these discussions and making a safe space in our community, and reading a variety of books and talking about them, you really start to see the culture in the classroom shift. And I think that if we can start that widespread globally, imagine what that can do for a global culture and community. So those were the main things that I really wanted to emphasize today. And again, thank you, Shilpi, for having me here. Is there anything else that I can touch on today?
Yes, I mean, I had been listening to the entire thing, and how, you know, in your own school and your colleagues have been working upon this, right? So, like, even off the line when we were discussing, just not how we, you know, pick up books and read it to the children and how we discuss it. Don't you think even the authors who are writing the books and the illustrations that they're doing in the books, that also has to undergo a lot of change, you know? And so would you like to throw a little light on that, you know, how the writing perspective also has to change with time?
Absolutely. So, and that's one of the things that I talk about with my students as well, is we look at these books, and like I had mentioned before, you know, historically, most books have had a lot of underrepresentation of all
Yes.
people, and or they have perpetuated a lot of stereotypes, a lot of gender bias. For example, when we talk about fairy tales, You know, there's you and I had talked about this before as well. You know, especially for the idea of a princess, you know, and, you know, women were very, you know, they weren't very strong characters, and it wasn't very empowering. And it was just taught that, you know, if you're a girl, your job is to just be beautiful or be a good mother. Yeah, that was kind of the key to happiness, right? So now, you know, there's definitely been a shift in recent times away from that, which is wonderful. But again, there is still a lot of work to do, and it's a very, very new trend that has shifted away from that. And so still, even though there's a lot of books coming out now that are changing these things, the amount of books that most children are still exposed to have been these books that have come from generations before. And so, you know, and it's not to say like I shouldn't not have those books in my library. I have many books in my library that are older books. But using those as tools for discussion as well, and being able to talk with the students and help them to understand that this might not be a realistic, you know, reality that's being represented in this story, and have a discussion about that.
Yeah, I believe, it should be that they should be allowed to read all sorts of book, right? From those times to this time. They shouldn't be told, oh, these books should not be read, they're old and the stuff doesn't relate to us. But because they should be allowed to read, because in every century, the position of women, or maybe the kind of discriminations that were there, has changed. So they should know what happened in the history and how have we come to this level. What has, actually evolved us. What lessons have we learned that we are here today, at this position. So that was a really wonderful discussion, Sarah, and thank you for being, taking out time from your school today and giving this session for us. I had thought that it's going to be an off for you, but it turns out it's a working day. So go ahead, have a nice day, and may God bless you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.